Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
And today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Samaches. And again, we're back into the discussion of who is a kosher aid. We discussed yesterday if someone eats treifas because he just doesn't believe in God, according to some opinions, he's a kosher aid. He's a kosher witness for Dine Mamanis. Rab Meir says he's not, but Rab Yossi says he is. Anyway, we're going to start from the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Here we go. And the Mishnah begins. Now, here we're talking about cousins. Believe it or not, uh, cousins or relatives cannot be a witness to you. And really, it's just a Gzeres HaKosif. You would think that a relative can't be a witness because he's going to lie in your behalf, but that's not true. Even if you have Moshe and Aaron brothers who are witnesses, we know they're not going to lie. They both can't sign on a ksuba, Moshe and Aaron. So you can't have witnesses who are related. So the Mishnah says like this: Ve'elu heina kroivim. The following relatives are disqualified from being a witness. So achiv, your brother can't be a witness. You can't be a witness for him. He can't be a witness for you. And together, you two brothers cannot be witness for somebody else. Va'achi aviv. You can't be a witness to get against your uncle or your uncle against you. Achi aviv is your father's brother. Va'achi imoy, and your mother's brother. Okay? Obal achoisoi, and your brother-in-law. How is he your brother-in-law? Your sister's husband. Since, again, here, it's interesting. You're only related to your sister, but once she has a husband, she's related to you. He's related to you, ishtay kegufoi, and therefore you cannot be a witness with him. He can't say testimony against you. You can't say testimony against him. Ubal achois aviv, and the husband of your father's sister. So if your father has a sister, her husband, which is your uncle, not a blood uncle, but your uncle, you also can't is not a kosher witness. Ubal achois imoy. If your mother has a sister and she has a husband, that also is a disqualified witness. Says the Mishnah, Ubal imoy, the husband of your mother, which is probably your stepfather. Your stepfather is no longer a kosher witness for you. The chamiv, and your father-in-law. The gisai, and your brother-in-law. Now, what's your brother-in-law? What's your brother-in-law? So Rashi says, we just discussed what brother-in-laws are. So the gisai means bal achois ishta, Rashi says, that your husband of your wife's sister. Okay, your wife has a sister, her husband is disqualified edis for you. Says the Mishnah, the chorgoi levade, just your, so the Mishnah says, hein, all these things are disqualified, not only themselves, ubeneim, their kids, v'chasneim, and their son-in-laws. So let's take example. Let's say you have a brother. So he's disqualified as a witness against you. Not only is he disqualified, but if he has a son, which is your nephew, he's also disqualified. And not only is your nephew disqualified, but chasneim, if your brother has a son-in-law, that guy also is disqualified as a witness. The chorgoi levade, but just your stepson means, let's say a person married and his wife had a son from a previous marriage. Only that stepson is prohibited to you as a witness. But if that stepson has another son, that's a good witness. Or if he has a son-in-law, that's fine. Amar Rabbi Yossi said, Zu Mishnah's Rabbi Akiva. This is Rabbi Akiva's Mishnah. Aval Mishnah Rishayna, the earlier Mishnayos, the earlier people held that only relatives of your father are not good witnesses. Relatives of your mother's side, they are good witnesses. So Doida, your uncle, Ben Doida, your cousin. V'chol hara'ud liyarshay, anybody who you potentially could inherit, and they can inherit you, that is from your father's side, those are disqualified witnesses. V'chol hakorev loy ba'oisa sha'a, and anybody who's a relative to you at that hour. For example, hoya karev, let's say you had a relative, vinis rachek, and then they became a distant relative. How is that? A person had a daughter, and he was married to somebody, so your son-in-law obviously can't be a witness. But let's say the daughter died. So now he's not really, he's your ex-son-in-law. So then he could be, so he was distant. So harezeh kasha, then he's kasha. Says Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, afilu mesa bita, if your daughter died, but v'yesh lo bonim mimena, you have children, that means you have grandchildren, harezeh korev, then your ex-son-in-law is still a relative of yours because you still have grandchildren from your daughter, even though your daughter is deceased. The Mishnah says, ha'oyev, you have a best friend. Everybody knows he's your best friend. That's not a good witness. V'hasoini, or somebody who's your enemy. They can't be, that cannot be a witness. Oyev, what's called a friend? Zeh sheshbinoi. That is somebody who watches over you. That is sheshbinoi. He watches you when you go to the chuppah. Shainei, an enemy, it's interesting. Kol shaloidiba ima shloishiyamim be'eva. You didn't pick up his phone and speak to him for 3 days because you're angry at him. That is an enemy. So then that's also a disqualified witness. So this is what Rabbi Yehuda said. Amurulai, so they said to him, Leinechshudu Yisrael al kach. Jews are not, can't accuse Jews to say falsely because of a personal gripe of hatred or love. So only Adis they're arguing. But that's what we're talking about over here. Regarding Adis, they're arguing. Obviously, your enemy should not be a dayan, a judge against you, because that already is, he's not going to find anything on your benefit. So fine. But regarding Adis, we always assume that the aide, when he's put under the gun, he's going to say the truth, even if he's your enemy. Says the Gemara, Mili, how do I know the following? How do I know that a father relatives cannot say witness against each other? How do you know that? The Tana Rabbana, Lo Yumsu Avos, you cannot kill a father, Al Bonim, because of the testimony of his son. So a son cannot say against his father that he was Mechal Shabbos. Ma Talmud Laima. What is the meaning of this pasuk? Im lelamed, does the Torah mean shlo yumsu avos ba'avoin bonim ubonim ba'avoin avos? Does the Torah mean that literally that if the father does an avera, if the son does an avera, the father should not be killed because of that, or if the son does an avera, if the father does an avera, the son can't be killed, or if the son does an avera, the father can't be killed. That's ridiculous because the Gemara says, "Harei kvar nema ish b'cheta yumasu." Everybody dies with his own sins. Nobody dies on behalf of somebody else's sins. So you can't, if your father did averis, that doesn't mean that you're going to be punished for it. What is the meaning? Lo yumsu avos al bonim. That means lo yumsu avos. Don't kill a father al bonim because his son said testimony. Be'edis bonim. Your son testified against you, it's not counted. Ubonim leyumsu al avos. If a father says testimony against his son that he was mechal Shabbos, leyumsu, you don't kill the son al avos through the testimony be'edis avos because of the testimony of his father. So now we open up a parenthesis over here. The Gemara just got through saying that it's very difficult to say that if a father does an avera, the son should be held accountable for, because the Torah tells us that everybody is accountable for his own book. Says the Gemara, is that true? A son will not die because his father did an avera. But doesn't the pasuk says poikid avoin avos al bonim? Hashem will punish children because of the averas of the father. So how do you reconcile that pasuk? Answers the Gemara, Hasam, over that pasuk is talking about when the children really hold on to the bad averas that their father did. And if they're following in the footsteps of their father, and therefore it becomes more entrenched in their nature. They're going to be punished because of what their father did. Because what's the whole point of punishment? Is to break your nature, to get you thinking in another direction. So therefore, if they're holding on to the actions of their fathers in their hands, they're very tight on it, then they will be punished because of the sins of their father. Keditanya, we learned in the Brisa, you will be punished because of the virus of your father. What is that talking about? Only if the kids are doing the same actions as their father. Asks the Brisa, you say they're actually doing what their father did. Maybe even if they don't do the actions of their father, they'll be punished because of their father's averis. Answers the Gemara, Brisa, if it says in the pasuk, ish becheta yumasu, everybody is punished or killed because of his own personal averis, not because of somebody else's. Hare, the only time you are held accountable for somebody else's averis, your father's averis, is where you're holding on to the actions of your father in your hands. You're really following exactly what your father did. So then you're not only going to get punished for your own averis, you're going to get punished for your father's averis. Says the Gemara, the law, is it a general rule that when I do an avera, you cannot get punished? Is that true? Vaksiv, we have a pasuk that says, "V'chashlu," in plural, ish ba'achiv. Everyone is held responsible if his brother does an avera. Ish ba'avoin achiv. Every person will get punished because of the averas of their brother. And that pasuk teaches you, Melamed, Shekulam, Arevin, Zebazeh, that we are all held responsible for each other. So we do see that you can do an avera and I'm held accountable. So how do you reconcile that pasuk which says ish becheta yamasu, that everybody's only accountable for his own averas? Answers the Gemara simply, hasam shahaya biyadam limchois v'loimichu. If you had the potential to protest, to give musar, and you didn't give musar, then you're held accountable for his averas. But normally, if you couldn't give musar and you couldn't straighten somebody out, you're not held accountable for his averas. Okay, we go to the top of the page of Chavches. Now says the Gemara, Ashkechan avis lebanim ubanim leavis. You just gave me a source that for witnesses, a father cannot be a witness against his son, and a son cannot be a witness against his father. The koshkein avis lahadadi, and certainly two brothers cannot be a witness against each other, right? That's the right. That can't work. Now the Gemara says, what about bonim lebanim lemanolan? How do I know that first cousins? This is another way of saying that two brothers having two sons. How do you know first cousins cannot be witness against each other? So the pasuk says, imkein, if it's true, lichtayv kra leyumsu aves aben, that the father should not be killed because of his son. My bonim, why is plural? Because if the whole point of the pasuk is teaching me that the son cannot testify against his father, so it's one son testifying against his father. What is about bonim, kids against their father? Bonim lahadadi, even if there are cousins to each other, right? They both have fathers, so therefore cousins cannot be testify. Again, what that means is not only can cousins testify against each other, but two first cousins cannot sign on a ksuba. Okay? Ashkecham bonim lahadadi. I find that first cousins bonim la'alma minolim. How do you know? Okay, the Gemara's question is exactly what I'm saying. Is I understand first cousins can't go against each other, but how do you know first cousins can't sign an ksuba for somebody else? That's a logical inference. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, so the verse the Gemara attempts to say that the reason why first cousins cannot be a witness for somebody else, right? Again, two first cousins cannot be edus on a ksuba is because the pasuk says, the Brisa says, two witnesses cannot become zoymimim until they both have hazama. So, in other words, if two first cousins are saying witness against somebody, and one of them is a zaymim, you have to do both of them zaymimim in order to punish those two first cousins. So really, they're linked to each other. So if they're linked, that means one cousin is being punished via another because of the edus of another cousin. So that must be a proof that two cousins cannot say witness even for somebody else. If you're going to say that first cousins for other people are kosher, it comes out that one cousin will be killed because of the edus of his other cousin. Because in order for them to be called Edim Zaymim, and the first cousins, both have to be Muzam. If they're both being Muzam, that means that one cousin is being killed because his other cousin, his partner in crime, his other first cousin, was also Muzam. So he's being killed basically because of his first cousin. And therefore, that's why first cousins cannot say testimony against somebody else, because you won't be able to be Mazim them. Amalei Rava said, why not? Well, according to your understanding of Hazama, Hadatnan, that we learned in the Mishnah. Shloisha Achen, you have three brothers, right? 1, 2, 3. The Echad Mitztarfi Moham. So you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and then you have another one called Moshe. And he is Mitztaref with Reuven or Levi or Shimon. Harei Elu Gimel Edius, they're like three different testimonies. Behein Edis Achas Lahazama. And they're one Edis for Hazama. Why do you need three? Because the guy is sitting on a field. So you have Reuven and Moshe saying, we saw this guy possessing this field the first year. Shimon and Moshe are saying, I saw him the second year. Levi and Moshe are saying, I saw him the third year. So each one of them needs an outside person to say testimony. But let's say if all three became Zaymimim, so then they would have to pay a field, right? And it comes out that each one is going to be paying a field because his brother became Muzam. And that's not a problem. So therefore, this idea of your proof of the reason why the two cousins cannot say Edis doesn't square off with this other Mishnah. The whole Indian of Azama is being killed not because he's linked to a cousin. It's the Hazama comes from out there that makes it a puzzle. So you can say the same thing over here. Hazama comes from elsewhere. Okay, so the Gemara, again, we are looking for a source. Here's the bottom line. We don't have the source yet. How do I know two first cousins cannot sign on a ksuba? How do you know it? So the Gemara tried something, but let's read it the way Gemara is going to come to the conclusion. In kain lichte kra ubein al aves. What is in Torah iname heim al aves? My ubanim, afil banim la alma. It's an extra word in the pasuk. So the extra word in the pasuk tells me that first cousins cannot be testified against any other, even if it's something not related to each other, to a third thing, like saying testimony on a ksuba, because there's an extra word. It says bonim, so I feel the bonim la'alma, even if they're cousins, they cannot say testimony for elsewhere outside. So now the Gemara says like this, Ashkechan kroive av. I understand that relatives of your father are apostle for edus. Kroive menolan. How do you know a relative of your mother is apostle? Because your pasuk leyumsa avos albanim is talking about a father and a relative of a father. How do you know an uncle through your mother's side is apostle edus? Makra avos treizimna. The Torah writes the word avos 2 times. If it doesn't have to teach you the relatives of your father, that the relatives of your father are apostle edis, so we say your mother's relatives are apostle edis. We learned that this teaches you only if they're doing something detrimental for you. How about if they're doing something meritorious for you? How do you know they're disqualified? Amakra yumsu trei zimna meaning that no matter what they're testifying, even if it's detrimental or doing something good for you, no matter what, a relative of your father, a relative of your mother is disqualified for any type of edus. Edus, let's say, of capital punishment. If they say that you did Chal Shabbos, we won't accept their edus because they're relatives. But this is only a proof of dina nefashis if they're trying to do capital punishment. How do you know that when it comes to financial cases, your relatives is also disqualified as an edus? The Torah says that Dina nefashos and Dina nemamonis are both the same laws. And just like relatives are puzzle for Dina nefashos, so also relatives from your mother's side and father's side are also puzzle by Dina mamonis, by monetary things. Gemara continues. Amar Rav. Rav said, Achi Abba lo yoidli. The brother of my father should not say testimony against me. Okay, that's my uncle, who not only he can't say testimony on my behalf, Ubenoi, his son, which is my first cousin, the Chassanoi, and also his Chassanoi is his son-in-law. Okay, so if my uncle has a son-in-law, he can testify against me. Afani loy oyed loy, and I can say testimony for him. Ani, not only me, Ubni, my own son, Chasani, and my son-in-law. Now, says the Gemara, wait a second. Why my own son and son-in-law cannot say testimony against my uncle? To them, it's their great uncle. Va'amai, havale shlishi barishan. They are third generation. They're the great nephew. Barishan to the great uncle. And why should they be disqualified? Va'anan sheni b'sheni tanan. We only know from the second generation, cousins to cousins are asa, or sheni b'rishon tanan, or a nephew to an uncle. Shlishi b'rishon loy tanan. But in our mission, it doesn't say a great nephew to a great uncle should be disqualified. So answers the Gemara, right. Then you have to say, my chasonoi. The Mishnah does say that it's disqualified because chasonoi means the son-in-law means Iktonimas Nisan, Chasan Benoi, the Chasan of his own son. So you have an uncle. He has a son. If that son has a son-in-law, that son-in-law is puzzled to say Adis. So that's the third generation to the first generation. So the Gemara says, well, listen to Ben Benoi. Let it say his son's son. Why does it go into his son-in-law? So Milk say Agav Urche Kamashmon, it takes your side note, the Baal Ki'ishtoi, that if the woman is puzzle, then the husband also is puzzle. The woman obviously is a grandson, a granddaughter. So if it's a granddaughter that's going to be puzzle, then her husband is also going to be puzzle Edis. Now the Gemara continues. That we learn. Tahani Reb Chia says Shemaina Avos. You have 8 Avos, means the father, son, and son-in-law and in 3 places. So your father, and son-in-law in 8 different scenarios. Shehein Esr Mabah, which turns out to be 24. But according to your understanding that you could go another generation down, Hani Tlasav Vitar, then there's actually 32. The son's son-in-law. Ella, says the Gemara, La'olam Chasonim Mamish. Why is it called the son-in-law of his son? That's why it's considered like another generation. So Ihachi have le shlishi b'sheni, Rav achsher b'shlishi b'sheni. Doesn't Rav make it kosher shlishi b'sheni? So the Gemara says, Rav the Omek Rab Loza. Rav held like Rab Loza. Amar Rab Loza, Kshem shachi abba lo ya'idli, hu ubnoi b'chasanoi, kach ben achi abba lo ya'idli, hu ubnoi v'chasanoi. V'Rav Kati havle shlishi b'sheni, Rav achsher shlishi b'sheni, Rav savala kavase b'chadei, upligale b'chadei. Rav holds it in one area and argues with him in another area. Again, once it's too far apart, a shlishi to a sheni, Rav will say it's still a kosher aid. Okay, a third generation to a second generation. My tamad Rav, Amar Rav Umso Avis Albonim, the Rav is Dar Acha. So it's from the first to the third. That's one. Rabbi Lazar Amar Albonim Amar Rachmana. So he learns that you learn that even from a shlishi to a sheni, that could also be a qualified witness. Let's go to the next Gemara, and then we'll stop. 2 more minutes. Amar Rav Nachman, Achi Chamoisi lo ya'ir. The brother of my father-in-law should not say testimony to me. Ben Achi Chamoisi, the son of the brother of my father-in-law, lo ya'ir. Ben Achois Chamoisi, the sister of my father-in-law, his son, lo ya'ir. But Tana Toina and our Bryce learned the same thing. Baal Achoisai, the husband of your sister. Ubal Achois Aviv, the husband of your father's sister. Ubal Achois Imai, the husband of your mother's sister. Heinu b'neim v'chasaneim are all disqualified. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi said, Ka'avinim be'ula, when I was in Ula's yeshiva, Ibailan, we had a question. Achi Chamiv Mahu, the brother of your father-in-law, Mahu, is it kosher? So my father-in-law had a brother named Harry, and I always remember this. So would he be kosher to say Edis? Ben Achi Chamiv Mahu. Or what about his son, the son of the brother of my father-in-law? Ben Achois Chamiv Mahu, or the son of my father-in-law's sister. So are these kosher? Amalan Tenisu, we learned it. Achu, Achi, Achiv, Achi, Aviv, Achi, Imoy, Heimen, Eseim, V'chanaseyim. One more piece. Rav Ikle Lemizbam. We go to Omen Beis. Rav Ikle Gvile. Rav went to purchase. Rav went to buy Gvile parchment. So while he's in the store, Boyumene. Last question. Mahu sheyad adam be'eshes chorgai. Can a person say testimony on the wife of his stepson? Right? Can you say, let's say, can you testify against your wife's stepson? Besura ama balki ishtoi. In Surah they say the husband's like his wife. Just like you're disqualified from your stepson, you're disqualified from his wife as well. But to Pidisa Amri Isha Kabbalah, they would say the opposite. That the Isha is like the husband. The woman is like the husband. The Amarav, Huna Amarav Nachman, Na'ish Isha Kabbalah. How do you know the wife is like the husband? Tiksiv, Erbas Achoisavika, Loisagala, Elishter, Loisikrav, Dedaskahi. Don't go to your father's brother, to your aunt. Don't go to his wife because it's Dedaskahi, it's your uncle. The Torah calls your aunt, your father's brother's wife, your uncle. Isn't it the wife of your uncle? It's not your uncle. From here you see the Isha Kabbalah, the woman is like her husband. So the bottom line is, and this will end, can a person testify against his wife of his son, of his stepson? Just like you can't say testimony against your stepson, the woman is like the stepson, and you wouldn't be qualified to say edus against the wife of your stepson. Okay, we're going to stop over here. This is major issues that come up with ksuba.